we might as well do the network config, because perhaps Ron, you might start hyperventilating here, but yeah, I got fed up with the whole debugging situation with Home System, with hundreds of devices, well, lots and lots of devices onto the network. And one evening, in just one sort of, I said, right, I've had it, because most of the time something doesn't work. And if your first problem is actually finding out where this thing is on the network, what it's supposed to be doing, and blah, 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 blah. So I have now changed a similar time as I switched to Pi-hole. So we use that for ad blocking, but Pi-hole has a DHCP server, and it's really easy then. So everything, all Home Assistant, all Tasmota, pretty much anything, then I've assigned an IP address to it. So even though it thinks it's using DHCP, it kind of isn't. And it was one evening's work. I just went into, into OneNote and just did a list. And again, it's something I'd recommend to everybody, because finding stuff on the network is just such a pain. Whereas now I've got to find, the heat pump stopped working, or light stopped working, or whatever it is. I know which IP address that thing is, and yet, I still have DHCP running. And the other good thing is, when you have to change broadband supplier and they change the network router and what have you, I haven't got the issue of all the DHCP setups, and I've got a repo, which has got, so you can back up the Pi-hole DHCP server settings so that I've got everything there. So it's sort of, you go through the story of Home Assistant, and everybody goes through phases. I've got to make this thing far more reliable than it was at the time. And you end up doing that. A large part of that was networking. So fixed IPs for all the phones, fixed leases for all of the IoT stuff that is with, backed up via Pi-hole if I lost everything, wired Ethernet wherever I can, Wi-Fi for everything, no Z stuff at all. And I've seen so much pain of people, you see all the threads, and I've lost every device on the network and everything. I've never been down that route, So I really don't have I think Wi-Fi gets a bad rap. It's a pretty reliable technology. I know it's sort of electrically expensive, but if you can use it, and it kind of works well.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is, I was going to say, what you mentioned is actually not talked about as often, right? In terms of things like reserving IP addresses in DHCP, things like that. Again, slightly more advanced for especially the non-technical users, but essentially some devices, like for example, if you have like a smart switch or like things like that, they don't allow you to say, hey, your IP address is, whatever, 192.168.0.123, right? Like, it won't allow that. But instead, what you can do is, like you said, Alistair, go on, your router settings, whatever, go in and say, hey, you know what, you're always going to be 192.168.0.123, right? So every time the device boots up, as long as it connects to the network, it will get that same IP address, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a really good point.
And it's a bit like the one with the phones. I use ARP plus ping as this thing. For most people, the trouble is I'm in the industry and I've done networking. ARP is the address resolution protocol. It's the relationship of the MAC address, which is the media access control, if I remember rightly. So that's the number that's usually imprinted on the device that you've got, so that when it jumps on the network, it has a fixed address. ARP is the process of matching that fixed address to the IP address. So in terms of like having awareness of whether your iPhone is in or out of the house, and regardless of whether it's gone to sleep or not, it keeps those ARP packets going, and it's a really important thing. So when you're doing the bit about sort of saying this device must have this specific IP address, you're getting the MAC address, which is the thing imprinted on the device, and getting that to say, okay, every time I see this one, I'm going to give it this specific IP address. I do take your point around. I listen to stuff and I go through stuff, and I think, I understand that, I get that straight away. But for the audience that we kind of want to reach out to, this stuff's going to be hard, because we're talking gobbledygook, or concepts that they don't understand. You see so many threads of people struggling with networking, and everybody, I feel it's almost like everybody at school should be taught, Ethernet, understand CSMA, CD, So that's the whole.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
I think the other thing too is even beyond that is every interface is different, right? So, every home router, every service provider's router that they give you, whatever, is looks, feels, whatever different. So that's why it does become a little difficult, right? But I think overall, I mean, it's if you do run into some of those issues, like for example, I used to run into issues all the time with my Wemo devices when I used to have them. Sticking a static IP on those things helped tremendously. I mean, now I know they have HomeKit support and stuff like that. This is kind of predating that, but even then, it's sometimes helpful to do that, right? Just that way, as an example, Home Assistant will pick it up every single time, right? And without it having to get rediscovered or anything like that, too, depending on how your network configuration is set up. So again, little
yeah,
tips to help out there, which again, like you said, also could be a little more uh, advanced or painstaking to start with, but once you know how to do it, it can save you a lot of pain.